thoughts, opinions, and general overall shade thrown on High at 9 News are those of the individual speakers and not those of High at 9 News, its audience, or its advertisers. The statements made do not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice, and for advice tailored to your specific situation, please consult with a licensed professional. Welcome to the High at 9 News Hour, where you will hear from cannabis industry experts and professionals from around the country talk about important topics while shining light on global issues and discussing cannabis as it relates to politics, regulation and reform, data and technology, science, research and medicine, family and parenting, art, celebrities and entertainment, fitness, sports, mental health and wellness, and plant-based medicines and entheogenics. Together, we are building a stronger community, fighting the stigma and creating change. With your host, Jason Beck, joined by special industry expert correspondents from around the country, and daily antics brought to you by Cannabis. Coming to you live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and high noon on the East Coast. And thank you all for getting high at 9 with us. Yeah. Good morning, doctors. It is Friday, February 27th, the last weekday in February. And today is National Skip the Straw Day. I don't necessarily agree with this one. I love straws, especially the plastic ones. I'm okay with the metal ones, but the paper ones are just terrible. And they say, doctors, that the paper ones really aren't good for you because they deteriorate in that water, and the glue that holds it together, they say, is not good for you.
I got to take you to a beach in Hawaii where you can see all the plastic straws littered all over the beach and change your mind.
Hey, maybe, maybe. I just so you know, doctor, if you want to take me to Hawaii, I'm totally down with that. I'm totally down with that for, a little exploratory experience. You know what I mean? All right. It's also it's Pokemon Day today. Interesting. It's Pokemon Day. Do you catch them all? Or because you guys are doctors, you guys try to stay away from catching anything?
I'm just too old. I don't know where you are, Mark, with this.
Yeah, I missed the boat on that.
I'm from the Marvel age, Spider-Man.
Oh, I'm from the baseball card age.
There you go.
Me too.
Yeah.
I have a whole bunch of baseball cards. Yeah, I got a whole container case over here of them. It's also Insomnia Awareness Day today. I think that actually is very timely because I think one of us has a story about insomnia today. Interesting.
That's me. Yeah.
Interesting. Yes. It's also National Retro Day, Dr. Mark, bringing it back to the 80s.
Yeah. I like that.
Aquanet hairspray and, you know what I'm saying? Big hair, all of that good stuff, It's also National Polar Bear Day. Shout out to Coca-Cola. This brought the most awareness to polar bears than any other company. And let's see, it's also National Kahlua Day, Dr. T. Do you sip Kahlua when you're in Hawaii?
I don't drink that much, but I like Kahlua. It's tasty. Okay.
It's a very, very island flavored title, Kahlua.
Yeah.
Yes.
Got the coffee taste.
And this probably is my favorite part of today. Today is National Strawberry Day.
Nice.
Yes. And thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us. It's also high noon on the East Coast. And please remember to like, share, and subscribe to us on all social media platforms. You can look up above and down below to see exactly where we live on the internet. And we are live every Monday through Friday on YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, X, Instagram, Facebook, Kick, as well as on our very own website, www.high9news.com. So welcome to everyone joining us from any one of those platforms. And Nick Bradley in the chat, he says that today is also Rye Pritchard's birthday. So happy birthday, Rye Pritchard. But here we go. Because a study finds cannabis use linked to higher cognitive scores in patients with psychotic disorders, you guys. Wow. Surprise. A study published in Pathophysiology Pathophysiology.
Physiology?
Yeah, Pathophysiology, thank you, reports that cannabis use was associated with higher cognitive performance among individuals diagnosed with psychotic disorders, challenging common assumptions about marijuana's impact on cognition in this population. The research was conducted by scientists from the Mother Teresa University Hospital Center in Tirana, Tor Vertaga University in Rome, Reykjavik University, and Link Campus University. And researchers examined 105 patients with psychotic disorders with an average age of 40.3 years of age, including 34 females. Participants underwent a series of clinical and cognitive assessments. Cognitive functioning was measured using the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, better known as MOCA. Psychopathology was evaluated through multiple standardized tools, including the Brief Negative Symptom Scale, the Calgary Depression Scale for schizophrenia, the Psychotic Symptom Rating Scales, and the Scale for Assessment of Thought, Language, and Communication. According to the findings, individuals who used cannabis were more likely to be male, younger, and to have experienced an earlier onset of psychosis compared to non-users. Despite concerns that marijuana use may worsen cognitive impairment, cannabis users demonstrated higher MoCA scores overall, and the strongest cognitive performance was observed among daily users. The authors note that cannabis use is especially prevalent among individuals with psychotic disorders, and prior research has generally linked marijuana use to cognitive defects in the broader population. However, the study found an unexpected association between cannabis use and preserved cognitive functioning in people with psychosis, and researchers caution that factors such as dosage, frequency, and use of cannabinoid consumption, including THC to CBD ratio, should be considered when interpreting these findings. They state that further research is needed to better understand how cannabis affects cognition in individuals with psychotic disorders. Well, surprise, surprise, this is something that we've said all the time, that people that are already crazy, when they use cannabis, it makes them a little bit crazier. This is something that we say all the time on the show. What do you guys have to say about this?
Well, just to be clear, I think they said it improved their cognitive effects. So
you're saying it? Well,
less crazy.
Okay. Well, I interpreted it improves their effects as making them more crazy.
Well, yeah, I can see that.
That's how I interpreted it. Hey, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert on these studies. I just try to read them and increase my vocabulary for you guys, and give you guys some laughs on words that I have trouble with.
But this is something that I've seen throughout my practice. I have had many people with psychotic disorders who have come telling me that they're using cannabis because it helps in many ways, in the typical ways that cannabis helps, reducing stress, improving sleep, all of that. So I'm not surprised that the cannabis users have better cognitive outcomes from, especially the daily users with cannabis. The data that's out there on psychosis and cannabis use is mostly correlative, not causative, meaning that they correlated people who use cannabis with improved with more psychotic episodes. So what comes first, the chicken or the egg?
Good question.
Psychosis come first and then the cannabis used to treat the psychosis, or did the cannabis use come first causing the psychosis, which is what a lot of people imply? Anyway.
Very, very true. Very, very true. What do you think about this, Dr. Mark?
Yeah, I totally agree with what John said. I think that, the prevalence of the CB1 receptor in the human brain, we'd be naive to think that it's not somehow involved with behavioral type disorders, and that there could be a biphasic response where, again, with some patients at certain doses, it actually makes them less psychotic because they're able to, achieve homeostasis, which I think would, again, something that would limit psychotic episodes or psychotic events. But then with other people who are probably more prone to that causing a psychotic event, that, it could, so in some it could help, in others it could hurt, and it might have to do with genetic predisposition, right, Dr. T?
Yeah, I mean, good point that it really depends on the individual. I have had the opposite happen where somebody with psychosis has tried a cannabis product and had a negative effect to it. So it doesn't really help everyone. But it's what I think this study is saying is that it can be an option, and it shouldn't be refused as an option to someone that's a psychotic disorder, because for some it appears to have a positive effect.
Yeah,
that's right.
Well, I think overall, I think this is good news, because it does actually then, based off your guys' analysis, it does contradict all the previous studies that say that cannabis causes psychotic disorders to increase, so to say. So this is a positive study showing that the exact opposite, which is another reason why they say, I'm sure, that more research is needed in order to diagnose. And who knows, there may just be some crazy gene that some people just have just naturally. You never know.
Right, and there could be upregulation of that gene under certain, I'll use that term again, chemical insults.
Yeah, I like that term. I'm a fan of that term, Dr. Mark. Just so you know, I'm a big fan of that. Chemical insults. Well,
yeah, I try not to chemically insult anybody.
Hey, it's all right. It's gonna be okay. We're here for it. If you want, I'll do all the chemical insulting if that makes you feel better.
But in your body, sometime in immune response, there is a like we were saying last week about cytokine storm with COVID. There's a signal that comes in to initiate some type of defensive response, and that defensive response can sometimes cause a lot of collateral damage. And so I'm not sure that that's germane actually to psychosis, but just in general, when you're chemically insulted with anything, whether it's a cannabinoid or sugar in your diet or whatever, your body is going to go through certain changes at the genetic level, and certain processes are going to be upregulated, other processes are going to be downregulated. And a lot of that is, again, just the balancing of the immune system. And what we know about cannabis and cannabinoids in general, and things that act on the endocannabinoid system, is the endocannabinoid system is trying to maintain homeostasis in a kind of give or take, kind of way. So I would think that, again, it depends on the patient, but if somebody is feeling a psychotic event and they consume cannabis, and that kind of, dials down their anxiety, maybe that can be again a positive way to get somebody who would maybe be prone to a psychotic event to be not as affected as much. I don't know.
Interesting.
There are biochemical explanations for psychosis too. There's dysregulation of the dopamine pathways, serotonin, glutamate, GABA, all of those neurotransmitters are off. There is inflammation, and there's oxidation in people with psychotic disorders. So there's a biochemical effect that can happen with these cannabinoids to help mediate that, and maybe that's what's happening too. Good point, Mark.
Interesting stuff, man. I always learn so much with you guys. And on that, we're going to go into our first commercial, and we are going to be right back. Oh, yes, and we are back, you guys. And I have another interesting study for you guys because it's Medical Fridays over here at High at 9 News. And a study finds that CBD reduces both acute and inflammatory pain, including in opioid-dependent subjects, you guys. That's right. Researchers published in the Journal of Psychiatric Research finds that cannabidiol, CBD, Dr. T's favorite cannabis compound, can significantly reduce both acute and inflammatory pain, including in subjects with morphine dependence. Researchers from Shahid Behasti University of Medical Sciences and the Iranian Academy of Medical Science examined how CBD affected pain responses in morphine-dependent and non-dependent rats. Chronic morphine use is known to cause tolerance and dependence, and often complicating long-term pain treatment and reducing the effectiveness of opioid medications. In the study, 84 male rats were divided into dependent and non-dependent groups, and morphine dependence was induced over 14 days using escalating oral doses. The animals were then subjected to a formalin test, a well-established model that triggers a two-phase pain response, an early acute phase and a later inflammatory phase. CBD was administered directly into the brain at varying doses prior to testing, and the formalin injection produced a biphasic pain responses, validating the model, while morphine dependence alone did not significantly alter baseline pain sensitivity. CBD led to a statistically significant and dose-dependent reduction in pain behaviors during both phases of the test, and the strongest and most consistent effects were observed at the 100. What's the little UG? It's like a funny looking UG and
micromolar.
Micromolar, 100 micromolar and 200 micromolar doses. And importantly, CBD's pain relieving effects were comparable in both morphine dependent and non-dependent animals, suggesting that opioid exposure did not diminish its efficiency. Or efficacy, excuse me. Additional open field testing showed no significant differences in locomotor activity, indicating that the observed pain reduction was not due to sedation or impaired movement. The researchers conclude that CBD may offer a promising non-opioid option for managing pain, including in individuals with opioid dependence without compromising motor function, you guys. Look at that. Look at that. We're getting some great news over here today. Cannabis not making you opioid dependent. I think this is fantastic, you guys. And this just goes to show, and maybe this is why, opioid treatment centers are so worried about cannabis and what it could do to their industry. And this study came out of Iran.
THC is different than CBD, and most of these centers, they focus on THC, and THC does have addictive potential, giving the reward, setting off the dopamine pathways, but it just doesn't have negative consequences to that addictive activity. But CBD actually has the opposite. It kind of curbs the addictive potential. Dopamine effect. So they just have to figure out whether they're talking about CBD or THC. And often people just assume you're talking about THC.
Well, they were only talking about CBD. This study was done in Iran.
Yeah. No, this study, they were pure CBD.
Yeah.
This study, these are things that we know. I'm glad that they're proving it more. They're injecting CBD into the brains of rats. I don't know. It just seemed a little like overkill. We know CBD is pretty safe. We know that it crosses the blood-brain barrier. So you can give it different ways. You don't have to inject it in the brain. But I guess they wanted a certain concentration in a certain part of the brain. It's good news. It's something that we've known already, that CBD is pretty safe and that you can give it in high concentrations to help with pain.
Well, I would think too, Dr. T, that if these rats are getting these injections right into their brain, it would help with headaches also, right?
You got to ask the rat that. I don't know. I think the needle in the head might have given him a headache.
Man, I was like, man, but it has anti-inflammatory effects, so the pain goes away faster, right?
Yeah, apparently.
Not to mention that's like true mainline and straight to the brain. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Any thoughts on this, Dr. Mark?
No, yeah, I was going to say that, the injection itself might be giving him the headache. Right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why one of my areas of research, we're investigating transnasal delivery, right? Because you want to get stuff into the brain. You want to get stuff into the brain by bypassing digestion and oxidation in the liver, and you want to get it there quickly. I think transnasal delivery wins.
Are you guys having an indication that you're considering for that, like headaches or?
Yeah, well, we're taking baby steps. We have to basically get the funding from NIH or from Department of Defense to basically do $100,000 type studies. I mean, things that are probably going to cost. It depends on like what our dose is, what the size of our animal groups are. We're probably going to do this in a mice model. We'd have to do it in mice to show that we have safety and efficacy before we can possibly do it in humans. But overall, the budget for the project is right around $1 million. And so I think if we get the initial set of data in mice that we could get IRB approval and try this like with CBD and approved cannabinoids for trials in humans. So I think traumatic brain injury is what we're sort of looking at immediately, just because that's very fundable and certainly like addressed towards like the NFL. I think if every time a player gets a concussion on the field, they should be getting a shot of CBD up the nose to reduce that neuroinflammation. So, but obviously sticking a syringe into somebody's brain through their cranium.
Through the cranium.
Might give a little bit of a migraine, don't you think?
Oh, man. It's rough, right?
But, that said, they do. I saw one of our students the other day. I mean, we have techniques for doing cerebral implants, and I know that certain diseases and certain epilepsies and other things like that, they actually have, these electrodes that sit in the brain, right? So again, maybe there's like a way, John, that something like that, like a delivery device can, if it senses either migraine or some other, like a seizure coming on, it can actually meter a dose of cannabinoid into the brain to, try to intervene in either a migraine episode or an epileptic seizure.
Are you guys testing to see what concentration of cannabinoids are getting into through the nasal?
Yeah, it's all about that. So what we were able to show in our first study is that we could actually get CBD into the brain of mice through a transnasal delivery. And we were formulating it at such a level that we wanted to be able to measure. Remember, Jason was talking about micromolar level. We were actually at like a micromolar level that's above the inhibition number for the CB1 receptor, right? So if we use THC in that payload, we would see activity, right? Because the concentration of THC in the brain tissue itself is above what the Ki is for receptor. The real question, John, and we don't know the answer to this until we start doing more testing, is does it result in a positive outcome for the patient? So I guess with traumatic brain injury, we would be looking at, the remodeling of that brain tissue around the injury itself creates a lot of scarring and a lot of other, issues with things called hypoxia. You know what that is. That's you're depriving brain cells from oxygen, and that can lead to all kinds of brain damage and other kinds of things. And so it's really important to establish that the reduction in neuroinflammation that cannabinoids like THC and CBD can provide would actually result in a beneficial outcome for the patient. Because when we do this kind of testing in animal models, they would, do something to the animal to say, okay, what does that outcome actually measure? Like what is the experimental observable in a way, with mice, sometimes they do this pain assay with this tail flick thing. So if the tail gets close to a heated source, the tail would want to flick away. So there's all kinds of different ways that they can measure whether or not that remodeling in the brain is actually having a positive or negative impact on the patient.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would shoot to getting the concentration up at the same levels that the ingested 10 to 25 mg per kg is getting, with Epidiolex. So if you can deliver that higher concentration intranasally, that would be great. And then the outcome won't be as specific as the tail flick tests, but you can look at outcomes such as scales around concentration, brain fog, insomnia, the things that irritability or anger, the things that people usually experience with CTE. There's a bunch of subjective symptoms. That's why it was difficult to diagnose early.
Well, and the group we're working with specializes in this type of transnasal delivery, and they've also looked at different we've talked about this a little bit on High 9 News, different biomarkers. So they'll measure things like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 6, interleukin 2, prostaglandin levels. And what they're trying to ascertain is whether or not the mechanisms by which CBD or THC or whatever cannabinoid we're using is reducing inflammation can be something that can be quantitated and measured. Because then you're absolutely right. It's all about the dose, because the thing that the cannabinoids are acting on is basically, again, trying to maintain homeostasis, but certainly, with THC intoxication, there could be too much, right? I mean, I think the perfect example when I think about dosing, which is a great point that you bring up, is that what Meshulam found is that below the psychoactive level, you could completely control chemotherapy-induced nausea.
Wow.
Right? So that would basically say that, I think, and Dr. T's point is that the old chemist would say the dose is in the poison, right? So depending on how much compound is in there, you could completely control nausea without getting a psychoactive effect. And that's really important, especially in children, right? Because you don't want to get children all buzzed and high, but you certainly want to prevent their nausea that they would get associated with chemotherapy.
Nick Bradley in the chat, doctors, says that he has a single-use benzodiazepine nasal spray that puts the drug directly into his brain.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so this is known for other drugs. I think, it's a relatively new thing with cannabinoids. Other people are definitely looking at this. I don't think we're the first and the only people to look at this. But another thing that we're interested in doing, Jason, and we've talked a little bit about this in High 9 News, with these nano emulsified versions, it really increases onset of activity, or the time at which the activity can be felt, but it also increases the bioavailability. And that's a real important aspect when it comes to cannabinoids, because cannabinoids are so water insoluble that anything that can be done to boost their bioavailability would, again, speak to, increasing in efficacy.
Interesting. Fascinating stuff, doctors. Well, on that, we're going to roll right into Dr. Jean Talleyrand. He's the founder of the CESC and of Medican, where you can get your doctor's recommendations online, all the time, every time, for just that low, low price. It is none other than the man, the myth, the legend himself, Dr. Jean Talleyrand.
Thank thank you, Jason. I hope we really are truly interesting on this.
You guys are. Trust me. Yeah, I get wrinkles in my brain after every episode with you guys, so I truly enjoy it.
Those are good wrinkles.
Wrinkles in your skin, right?
Yeah, I don't do wrinkles in my skin, just wrinkles in my brain. Yep.
Okay, so happy Friday, everyone. My story today is from Marijuana Herald. Cannabis-based herbal formula matches Lorazepam for chronic insomnia relief. This is by Anthony Martinelli. So a randomized clinical trial published in the Journal of Cannabis Research found that a traditional Thai cannabis-based multi-herbal formulation was just as effective as lorazepam in improving sleep among patients with chronic insomnia. For those who don't know, lorazepam is similar to Valium or the Ativan that Nick Bradley was just talking about. The study was conducted by researchers in Thailand with the herbal formula where the herbal formula is legally recognized for its therapeutic use and clinical research. Clinical data evaluating its impact on insomnia has remained limited until now. In this phase 2 randomized double-blind, which I will object to soon, trial, 100 participants with chronic insomnia were assigned to receive either the cannabis-based herbal formulation known as anti-palm lung fever medicine or lorazepam over a 4-week period. Sleep quality was measured using the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, a widely used tool for assessing insomnia severity. 82 participants completed the trial with 41 individuals in each treatment group. Both groups experienced significant improvements in sleep quality over the 4 weeks. By the end of the study, the herbal formulation group had a mean PSQI score of 3.44 compared to 4.78 in the lorazepam group. So even though lorazepam had a better score, the researchers determined that it wasn't significantly better, meaning the herbal treatment performed at least as well as the prescription sleep medication. Researchers also found a significant improvement in sleep quality over time in both groups, with no meaningful difference in how the treatments performed across the study period. Measures of quality of life and stress improved in both sets of participants. And importantly, safety outcomes were comparable between the two treatments. No clinically significant adverse effects were reported, and laboratory and clinical assessments indicated that the herbal formulation was well tolerated. The herbal formula contains 50% cannabis by weight, and then the other herbal constituents includes pepper, ginger, long pepper, sandalwood, neem, and 5-leaved chaste. According to the study's conclusion, the findings support the use of the traditional Thai cannabis-based formula as an alternative option for managing chronic insomnia. So the most glaring limitation to this study is that it is not blinded. Your lorazepam looks nothing like a Thai herbal formula unless they created the Thai herbal formula into a pill that looks like lorazepam, which be hard to imagine pepper looking like. Anyway, so this is not a blinded study, although they're saying it's a blinded study, and so that gives bias. If people are biased toward herbs, they'll report positively there. They're biased toward pills, they'll report bias there. Other concerns are consistency. Is every package predictably the same? When relying on medicine, patients expect the same dose every time, although that may not be reasonable, a reasonable request. You're not the same every day. Does the same dose may not work the same every day? Either way, this study found that there wasn't much difference between the herbal sleep aid and the pill. However, the pill is more dangerous. Regular use of any benzodiazepine, which is what this lorazepam is, can quickly turn into tolerance. After 2 weeks, a patient may need to increase the dose. Overdosing lorazepam can be deadly. It can stop your breathing. Withdrawal may cause seizures. The profile of cannabis is much safer choice. So what do you prefer to use to get to sleep? An herbal remedy or a pill? This is Dr. Jean Talleyrand with High at 9 News.
You know, Dr. T, I'm just naturally opposed to pills, just in general. Like, I don't even necessarily like vitamins. I just feel like all of them, unless I actually made them myself, there's no way that I trust taking anything. That's just my personal preference.
What if it's like a turmeric capsule or something? Would you do those?
I mean, I may, it would have to be something to where someone that I actually trusted was like, hey, this is actually good, da 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 da. They'd have to like talk up the product to get me to take it. But other than that, I'm not taking any of it. I don't trust any of that stuff by any of those people. And that's just my general rule of thumb is trust none of them.
Would you say that cannabis is your most used medicine?
Yeah. Besides oxygen, nope. I don't get headaches. I don't believe in sickness. Any of that. You know what I mean? Pain is a real thing, but it's a normality for me as opposed to something that comes and goes. So to me, it's always there. So it's not.
Pain's always there.
Yeah.
So you've gotten used to it somewhere.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, that's one of the things that, I thank God for is the fact that I was born this way as opposed to developing it at a certain age where then my mind would constantly, I'm sure would be, oh, I remember when things weren't like this. Like to me, I don't know any different. So it just is what it is. It's been a constant forever.
Yeah. Hey, that's looking at life with the glass half full. Very optimistic of you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that, especially coming from you, Dr. T. Man, look at that. Wow.
There's a compliment in there somewhere.
I love it. Oh, man, I'm with this. This is great. I'm getting a gold star today. I'm excited. Any thoughts on this, Dr. Mark?
Yeah, I was thinking taking a benzo before sleep is a good thing. Right?
It works.
Yeah, I know. It's like, right, but yeah, I mean, well, what we now know, now that there's clinical evidence from that group in Australia that we talked about last year, is that CBN is effective in promoting sleep. Anecdotally, it was thought for many years that CBN was good for sleep, but now there's clinical data to actually show that, yeah, it actually does affect sleep. So, I don't know. I mean, the benzos are needed for certain conditions, but maybe, just in harm reduction, maybe you could use cannabinoids and not have to resort to benzos. I don't know. But and all that other stuff. I mean, there was a cocktail of different stuff in there. I mean, my gosh, you start sounding more like a witch doctor, right? Because you're just taking, okay, let's see what to add a little bit of this, add a pinch of this, add a little bit.
Yeah.
Of stir it up.
That's multi-agent pharmacology. That's witch doctors.
That's right. That's right. And I know that, some cannabis companies were adding like theobromine, Dr. T, and some were adding, melanin,
melatonin.
Melatonin. I'm sorry, not melanin. But I guess the notion was, again, I think there's actually a lawsuit for a company in Colorado, I think, not California, that was taking like some mushroom components and adding some other things. I mean, until you really do the safety assessment, I mean, like there's an entourage effect with cannabis, and we all know that, right? That, the isolates aren't as effective as like a full spectrum extract, right? But when you start really playing nature and just start adding, let's add a little bit of this, let's add a little bit of this, now you're going to create a new entourage effect, and you're really not going to be able to predict reliably how two things are going to interact, let alone how 4 or 5 things when you co-formulate them at different concentrations. And all of these things are metabolized by the body, so every single compound that goes into the liver gets metabolized into 10 different compounds. Now it's not just the 5 components that are in the product. Now it's the 50 or 100 different metabolites that are made by all these things, and it's a real guessing game. and perhaps something that, can easily develop a adverse effect to, that you don't know how these things are going to interact in the body.
Yeah. Interesting.
And until those studies are done, it's just, I don't know. I mean, when I look at this, it's like, oh my gosh, they're just reaching for everything that's on the shelf that day, right?
Well, I mean, I'm curious how the formula got. It's obviously a formula that's been used for quite a while. So over the ages, it was developed. Whether it was studied, who knows? And maybe it was somebody's family recipe that was just packaged into.
Well, and isn't that how we arrived at ayahuasca, right? So ayahuasca, I mean, is not a single natural product, right? It's the addition of two natural products together, or two extracts together, right? So ayahuasca needed humans on planet Earth to be able to put those things together, right?
Yep.
But you have to believe, Jean, that they've, just over the years have understood like what the right proportions are, what the right doses are, that,
killed off a few family members.
You guys are funny.
And then we arrived at something that worked.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Exactly. Well, this was great. This was great. On that, we're going to roll into our next commercial, and we are going to be right back.
Rescheduling cannabis, which was classified as more dangerous than fentanyl. Trump's action will destroy the cartel's illicit black market, expand medical research, and ensure seniors and veterans safely receive the care they need. Thank President Trump for delivering on another America First promise.
Oh, and we are back. Stop whatever you're doing. Make sure you smash that like button. I know we'll appreciate it. You'll appreciate it, and YouTube will appreciate it. Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already. And all of the articles that we cover on today's show, you can read directly on our website at www.highat9news.com. And please make sure that you are following us on X and Rumble, as those are the two most stablest platforms on the metaverse. And two quick notes for you guys. I will be speaking tomorrow, Saturday, in West Hollywood at the City Council chambers. We're doing a whole cannabis symposium throughout the day. I know Fiona Ma, our California State Treasurer, is going to be there speaking at 10 a.m. I'm going to be talking about medical cannabis, Dr. T, at 11 a.m. Okay. And there's going to be a whole host of things. I know the tickets are sold out, but you know what I'm saying? If you message me, I'm sure I can make some magic happen, you know what I'm saying, for you. And I hope to see everybody's there. And also one other quick note, on March 15th at 3 p.m., Catalyst is hosting a protest outside of the Mann's Chinese Theater against all of the pedophilia that's been running rampant throughout our country. And so please show up, show some support, bring some signs, and we're going to have a good time as we protest the pedophiles outside of Mann's Chinese Theater on March 15th at 3 p.m.
Are you?
Under President Trump, America is back. Trump's delivered the largest tax cut in history, putting more money in our pockets and restored America's economic dominance. Promises made, promises kept. Now it's time to fulfill another promise from President Trump and reschedule cannabis, which supports over 400,000 jobs and creates billions of dollars in economic growth. Reschedule cannabis and stack another win, Mr. President. America First Agriculture Action Inc. is responsible for the contents of this advertising.
Opinions. Everyone's entitled to their opinions. And on that, we are going to roll right in to Dr. Mark Scialdone. He's doing cannabis research in a lab up there in the great green mountain state of Vermont, over there at St. Michael's College, not a university. Yeah, it is none other than the man himself, Mr. Science. None other than Dr. Mark Scialdone.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah.
Thank you. And always great to gather with my friend Jean Talleyrand. Jean, I see that you're attending CanMed this year.
Yeah, I'm doing a panel, I believe.
Yeah.
That was so fucking awesome. You know why that's great? Because you and I are going to get to meet and hang out.
Oh, awesome.
For the first time ever.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
This world will never be the same. No, I'm looking forward to it. So today, hey, Jason, you're going to love this story. Oh my gosh. Today, it kind of feeds off the story that we did last week with Kyle Boyer, who joined us on High at 9 News to go through the report from Colorado about the concern that our friend Tess Item has around mycotoxins that are occurring in cannabis. So today, my article that I'm covering comes from the Journal of Cannabis Research, and it's titled Comparative Analysis of Metals, Pesticides, Mycotoxins, Microbial Contaminants, and THC Potency in Illicit and Regulated Cannabis Inflorescences, which is a scientific name for flower, in, drumroll please, the country of Canada. Okay? So our friends up in Canada, our friends to the north, our Canadian friends. And, you know, when I look at this article, you know, again, being a scientist, there's 36 authors on a single scientific paper. I don't know if any of our audience members have ever had to write a scientific paper. It's difficult to write with 2 authors, let alone with 36 authors. Oh my gosh. So this is certainly 36 authors. You could have 3 football teams worth of people on this paper. It's just super interesting because this is basically run, the study itself was conducted by these folks at Health Canada. This is basically the people who, I guess, one of the affiliations is the Pesticide Laboratory, Regulatory Operations and Enforcement Branch of Health Canada in Ottawa. Another is the Microbiology Lab, Regulatory Operations Enforcement Branch of Health Canada. And the third is the Cannabis Laboratory, Regulatory Operations Enforcement Branch of Health Canada. So Health Canada is kind of like Canada's version of the FDA, right? So think of this as coming from their FDA scientists. And so what they found, I'm going to read through the background and go right to the conclusion, but we can talk a little bit more about the ramifications of this. I'll summarize. I got some notes here on my iPad here. And so the purpose of the study was they wanted to look at, so this is Health Canada, again, wanting to look at THC potency, microbial, heavy metal, and mycotoxin contaminants in both licensed products that are in the Canadian dispensaries, but also the illicit products. I take it from the trap market, what they're calling illicit products. And so the researchers here, so I take it that most of the 36 authors on this paper didn't write the paper at all. They were just the scientists in the lab who were basically doing all the testing. So God bless Canada that they got 36 people that they could turn loose on such an important problem. So the researchers evaluated whether legalization improved product quality and safety and consistency by comparing the heavy metals testing along with pesticides, mycotoxins, looking for microbial contamination as well, but also looking at the very important number of THC and whether or not the THC potency that's on the label of the thing in the dispensary is what they say it is. You know, you're not going to get a label on an illicit product, right? You're just going to get a baggie full of weed. So they also analyzed the potency of what is in the illicit market just to see what kind of potency they were seeing. So they looked at 100 different samples. They looked at 50 of those were from licensed products from dispensaries, and 50 were the illegal samples. They're only looking at flower here, so they're looking at the inflorescences, so they didn't look at like gummies or beverages or anything like that. So for THC potency, they carried out by HPLC, using both UV detection and mass spectrometer detection. That gives them kind of like a double-headed way of looking at both The UV is just a way of making the measurement from the HPLC, as is the mass spec. Mass spec is usually a little bit more sensitive, so you're going to get better numbers in the mass spectrometer. For pesticides, they did the analysis again by HPLC using MSMS, or in some cases they use GC, also using MSMS. When I say MSMS, what that means is that they're doing a method that's called MSMS. So they have what's called a quadrupole mass spectrometer, and like it says, quad is 4, so it's basically 4 poles within the mass spectrometer, and they do one ionization to look at mass spec. And what mass spec looks at is you basically ionize a molecule, and then the molecule is so full of energy that it breaks apart into these different fragments. And so from the fragments, you can kind of get a fragmentation pattern, and that's kind of like a thumbprint for a molecule. So it's just a way of identifying these pesticides by looking at the fragments that come out of the mass spectrometer. So for metals, they did ICP, which stands for ion-coupled plasma, and that's a very, very sensitive method. They also use a mass spectrometer to detect the different metals like chromium, barium, some nasty ones too, like lead and mercury and stuff like that. For mycotoxins, they also did by LC mass spec. And then for the microbiological contaminations, they just used regular PCR kits that are widely available, and then did something called MALDI, which is matrix-assisted laser absorption spectroscopy, just as a way to basically verify that they were getting the hits that they were getting. So the major findings from this study is that 48% of the products from licensed, okay, this is the licensed stuff, Jason. So this is the Canadian booth that you talk about all the time. 48% of the licensed products deviated plus or minus more than 20% from the labeled THC value, right? So that means if you're looking at a dispensary product of inflorescences, which is flower in Canada, that the wiggle room on that THC number is it could be 20% more, it could be 20% less. That's kind of unacceptable, right? Those should be just plus or minus just a couple percent. 20% is way too high. And it appears as though regulation improved the safety, but not necessarily ensured the accuracy of this potency measurement. Plus or minus 20% is just not acceptable in this day and age. So for microbial contamination, what they found with the licensed cannabis products is that 20% of those products exceeded the European Pharmacopoeia standards. Now, it's really difficult because when you do something called PCR analysis, PCR stands for polymerase chain reaction. And that was actually something that was invented by a Nobel Prize winning surfer dude from California named Kerry Mullis, who won the Nobel Prize. And when this method was developed, again, they basically are able to find little snippets of DNA, and they're able to basically multiply it to basically quantify how much of this microbial contamination there was in these samples. And so what they said, again, with the licensed samples is that 20% exceeded what the acceptable limits are. With the illicit cannabis, check this out, Jason, 55% exceeded bacterial limits, right? So that means you're getting cannabis on the black market or legacy market up in Canada. Chances are there's microbial contamination on there. 55% showed exceeding the bacterial limits. 73% exceeded yeast or mold limits. Now, the one caveat to this is that if you look at their method, how they did their microbiological testing, they're doing it using again methods that are basically just detecting the DNA of the microorganism. So just because they're detecting the DNA of the microorganism does not necessarily mean that the microorganism is alive on that cannabis. It was at one point, but it may not be, right? And face it, folks, we live in a microbial world, right? There's microbial spores, if you're talking about yeast, everywhere, right? If you just leave a wet sugar donut on the counter, it eventually is going to mold because mold spores find it, it starts eating it, and that's it. And you're going to get a moldy donut, right? So this cannabis is not necessarily moldy because they're finding the DNA of these things. But what they can do is they can look for, so when you look at the total yeast and mold counts, yeah, these numbers look pretty high, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the cannabis is contaminated with yeast. Where it's a real problem is when they're actually identifying some of the subspecies here. And what you see is that there's some Enterobacter species here. I see 2 different Enterobacter species in 33 of the 50 samples from the illicit market, okay? That's a huge amount, right? In 12 of those 50 samples, they're finding this other Enterobacter species. Enterobacter, as you know, Dr. T can tell you, can cause all kinds of GI distress. Not that you'd be eating this cannabis. Chances are you'd be smoking this cannabis, right? So I don't know, is smoking cannabis that's got Enterobacter on it, is that going to somehow get Enterobacter into your body? Probably not. But if you had Enterobacter in your sandwich that you ate for lunch today, or your whatever you had for breakfast, chances are that could give you an upset stomach. You can end up getting diarrhea. I know I've had Campylobacter before, which is, again, similar type of organism here. These aren't things that you definitely want. In the Pseudomonas family, they found a couple Pseudomonases. So in 13 of the 50 samples from the illicit market, they found Pseudomonas petita. That's a pretty common Pseudomonas. I'm not sure that that's a really nasty one. They also looked at the Aspergillus subspecies, and what they find is that Aspergillus ocharius, and we'll get back to that in a second, was found in 11 of those 30 samples. So they're not really seeing some of the more nasty forms of Aspergillus, black mold, Aspergillus niger, or Aspergillus fumigatus, or some of these other ones just are very low in occurring. So what they also found, and again, this gets to the point of safety, is that with mycotoxins, so remember, Kyle came on last week and described what mycotoxins are. Remember, we brought up the example that Jason brought up about penicillium makes penicillin. So these molds that infect cannabis will emit compounds as antibiotics, and those compounds are basically survival of the fittest, right? Those compounds are basically to make sure that no other microbe or yeast is challenging that particular microbe for its food supply, right? And it turns out that some of those compounds, the mycotoxins, can be dangerous to humans, right? We talked about the peanut toxin, right? So rotten peanuts, when that goes bad, it generates a compound called aflatoxin. People who are very sensitive to peanut or have peanut allergies are very sensitive to things like aflatoxin could be absolutely deadly. And people do die from eating peanuts. No one dies from cannabis, so now we could say it. Cannabis is safer than peanuts, right? Okay, so here's the interesting thing. Present in 12% of the illicit samples were mycotoxins, right? So typically, we don't see mycotoxins. Again, if right production controls are in, grows that are licensed, they do not see any mycotoxins, but there were mycotoxins in 12% of the illicit samples. And in particular, so I'm scrolling into the paper here, when I look at the mycotoxins, what they say is that licensed cannabis products showed no detectable levels of mycotoxins covered by this method, which covered aflatoxins B1, B2, G1, and G2. Those are the peanut aflatoxins. And I'm not sure, I don't know about you, Dr. T, I'm not sure I've ever seen any cannabis product fail for presence of mycotoxin. and or failed presence of aflatoxin, which is a type of mycotoxin. However, ochratoxin, and ochratoxin is very interesting because that is toxic to humans, and it's made by the species of Aspergillus that they identified. So not only did they identify the mycotoxin, they also identified the species of fungus that actually generates it. So that's a very nice way of closing the loop. Someone's got problems with Aspergillus contamination, and in that case, it's creating samples that have measurable levels of ochratoxin. And also, they found the deoxynivalenol, or what we called, remember this from a couple weeks ago? Vomit toxin. So they found that vomit toxin. That's the thing that, again, they believe that its presence in cannabis can lead to cannabis hyperemesis syndrome. So 6 of the samples, or 12%, tested positive for these mycotoxins, with ochratoxin, and 3 containing this vomit toxin. So I thought that was super interesting. Okay, so let's move to pesticides. So for pesticides, in the licensed product, they only found trace residue in 2 different samples. However, in the non-licensed products, oh man, there's pesticides all over the place, right? Various different levels. I mean, this basically shows you that, again, regulating cannabis production and excluding pesticide use in licensed cannabis production is resulting in cannabis that's not being not being contaminated with pesticides. For heavy metals, with the illicit cannabis, they're finding levels of arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury that are above the thresholds that the USP allows in cannabis. And in some licensed products, there were some elevated levels of chromium. I have some thinking on where that might be coming. So both categories occasionally exceeded USP exposure limits, confirming again that cannabis, and we know this, right, Jason? Cannabis is a metal accumulator. So whatever metals are in your soil or in your growing medium is going to end up in your cannabis. That's just the way cannabis works, right? It draws its nutrients and everything from the soil. So if there's heavy metal contamination in the soil, you're going to see heavy metal contamination in cannabis. So the conclusions are basically regulation lowers the contamination risk. At least this is what we find in this study from Canada. Now you got to remember, the people making these statements are Health Canada, right? Health Canada's got a dog in the fight, right? Because they're basically regulating the licensed market and probably trying to snuff out the illicit market. So the illicit cannabis shows substantially higher safety hazards. Well, again, coming from this group that basically wants to see this illicit market go away.
Dr.
Licensed products still display some quality control weaknesses, right? Because they're still finding, in the case of pesticides, they found 2 samples that were pesticide contaminated. That means somebody's spraying somewhere up there. Potency labeling remains inconsistent, whether it's the illicit market or the non-illicit market. Now, here's what I found really super interesting. So they were looking at THC levels. And when we're looking at the THC levels, I think we already said that 20% is just too much. Standard deviation. It should be more like about 3, 4, maybe 5% at the most. Here they're finding again that the THC level is not basically what the labs in Canada are reporting. When you look at the illicit products, this is super interesting here. So you see a number of products that are basically testing between 15 and 17%. Another group of products clustering around 20 to 24% THC. So they are growing some pretty potent materials. These are higher in general than the THC percentages that they're finding from the licensed grows. So I think that's interesting. Then lastly, heavy metals are ending up in cannabis. We know cannabis is a heavy metal accumulator. So you have to look at where your point source of contamination is. When they see chromium levels that are higher than normal, there's a lot of chromate and chromium type processing that happens up in Canada. One of the things that happens in Canada that does not happen in the United States, I think it happens in Mexico too, is they actually have these baths where they take a complete airline fuselage and dip it into a bath that contains chromium, because chromium ends up pickling the surface of the skin of the plane, and that's really important to create what's called a conversion coat, because normally paint doesn't just stick to aluminum, right? You need a conversion coat in order for the paint to stick there. So if you're not able to paint airplanes, all the airplanes in the sky are going to be silver. The other thing that the chromium does in the conversion coat is it insulates the plane from lightning strikes. So when lightning hits a plane, the charge of the lightning is diffused around the plane, ultimately finding ground. If that conversion coat wasn't there, you'd probably have a lot more.
So that conversion coat works.
Catastrophic lightning strikes on planes.
That conversion quote that you just mentioned is the same thing, like why cars have rubber tires at the same time too, because the rubber tires immediately ground a car if a vehicle is struck by.
So not exactly, Jason. So the rubber is an insulator.
Okay.
Right. So rubber does not conduct electricity, and so what that does is it insulates the car from the ground, right? Mm-hmm. So it doesn't make a car an attractive surface for the lightning bolt.
Got it.
Because the lightning bolt can't get the ground because it can't go through the tires.
Got it.
But you bring up a really interesting point, which is that I'll just say that if you're growing cannabis outdoors and you're using pressure-treated lumber, the old pressure-treated lumber has got chromium in it because it was chromated copper arsenate. So it has not only chromium, also has arsenic in it. Mm-hmm. So if you're using older pressure-treated lumber as kind of like your timbers that you're using for a raised bed, probably not a good idea, right? Because ultimately that chromium, that arsenic, is going to leach into the soil and then get up into your plants. So for point source contamination, you should definitely, any soil that you bring into your facility or any soil that you end up growing in, you should always do a heavy metal test on the soil itself, because whatever metals are in the soil, they're going to end up in your cannabis, right? Mm-hmm. And what we found out, again, is that there is commercial soils that are being sold that have heavy metal contamination, and that's where this heavy metal was coming from. Even like with an indoor grow, you'd think, well, how are you going to get heavy metal if everything is just, soil and pots and everything? Well, again, there could be contamination coming into the building. So I guess the key takeaway is that it appears as though, at least in Canada, legal cannabis is cleaner and safer. The illicit supplies have got not only mycotoxins and pesticides, but they also have microbials, heavy metals, and other things that potentially are bad.
I don't buy that.
So we need to, adopt quality control measures, like I said, testing the soil before you grow cannabis in it, and other things within your supply chain to try to minimize this kind of contamination.
Well, Dr.
What we also know is that after you harvest the cannabis, that's when the cannabis is most susceptible to microbial contamination. So if you're getting your your drying and your curing steps right, you have to do that in a place where, again, you're not going to foster microbial growth. Because if you can get microbial growth, then you open up the opportunity for these mycotoxins to then contaminate your cannabis. So, Jason, I thought you would love this because you've been talking about Canadian booth for years.
It's Canadian.
Now here's the scientific paper with 36 authors to tell you that Jason was right.
Exactly. Look at this. Look at what a great day to this. I got a gold star from Dr. T. I got a Jason is right. Canadian weed is the cause of all the problems within cannabis. Like, this is and we have scientific data to back this up. It's all Canada's fault.
Yeah. Well, and it's super interesting that they're just looking at the flowers. You think, I know hash is pretty popular up in Canada, and one of the things about making ice water hash is when you wash and you're recovering your hash, that hash is super saturated with water, and so it is a clock ticking that basically you need to get all of that water out, or else within hours, Jason, that hash can start turning moldy.
Yep.
And so
I have seen that happen a lot of
interesting
times.
Yeah. In fact, that's one of the reasons why, most water hashing operations and washing operations will immediately get that stuff into a freeze dryer, because you're trying to pull off as much of that as you possibly can. And there's no way of knowing, again, there's going to be a trace amount of water in the air itself, but you have to basically pull all of that water off as quickly as you can.
Dr. T, any thoughts on this, Dr. T?
I'm just curious where they got the illegal weed to do this study, because it seems like, because in California, illegal weed is the same as legal weed, just diverted out of the legal system. So I would see I would think that the tests would be the same in California, but I don't know what's going on in Canada. Where did they get it? Did they go out to the woods, and did they go out in the streets and get some illegal weed? Where did they get it from?
I mean, I'm willing to guess that it's all the it's all the all the terrible product that is that's grown probably in Washington State.
What do they walk the streets and buy it that way? Or,
I would. That's what I would do.
Out to the country.
That's what I would do. I'd go stand on a corner, wait for someone to walk by that looks, looks conspicuous, and ask him what's he got for sale, and you know what I mean. It's not that hard to get, you know what I mean? Plus, too, Dr. T, a lot of these people are selling their stuff online. And so they probably just use social media to order a bunch of stuff over there that was all from the trap market, and boom. A lot of it is all online.
Oh, they're buying it online. I see.
You can buy a lot of this stuff online.
Well, I would think, too, that they probably have access to law enforcement because they're Health Canada.
That's possible too. Yeah, it could be all product that's seized. Yep.
They got it from the cops. I see. Yep. The other thing is, why didn't they test for CBD? It doesn't make sense to me. Why would you only test for THC?
Because I think they're just trying to talk about the inconsistencies between the regulated and non-regulated market. Everyone's interested in the THC level because they want to, get high. So I think it was just maybe just a point. That, hey, THC potency can often be inflated or underreported. And,
well, the THC-centric view of the world is I think, limited, And then the last concern is in our studies, we did look at outdoor cultivar, a plot of plants from the same cultivar, and we saw upwards of 50% variation in that plot. So I believe that the 20%. I think whether it's facing the sun or not facing the sun, if you're growing it outdoors, the variability is huge. The ratios stay the same, though, which is why I would say test THC plus CBD, because you'll get a consistent ratio. But the content will differ.
Yep.
Or the potency.
Right. And I guess there could be some THC degradation in the package. I mean,
boy, THC degradation.
So until they kind of look at all of the things that could affect that, then they'd really have to come up with some
Dr. Mark
criteria, because maybe what they need to do is they need to be a little bit tighter on their shelf life and say if the
it could be a sampling thing, because
decomposes beyond say 10 or 15%, they should pull those products from the shelf because the label no longer depicts what's in the jar.
Dr. Mark,
what I do see is when they take the flour and they grind it all together and then do 3 steps then you'll get that 3 to 5% variability. But if you're just picking buds from a plant, you're going to get upwards of 20 to 50% variability. So it could be simply how they sampled and tested.
Well, all I know is that Canadian weed is not good, and no one should buy it or smoke it or anything, because apparently it causes scromiting. And on that, we're going to roll into our final commercial, and we're going to be right back.
I just ordered the summertime strawberry salad when added steak on top here at Anna's. Make sure you do the same thing too next time you're in downtown Long Beach. Come on down and check out Anna's joint on the 400 block of Pine Street. They have amazing selection of beers, foods, and when you come down here to Anna's, you can even challenge me to a game of shuffleboard if you want to lose. Did you get that? So, next time you're in downtown Long Beach on Pine Avenue, make sure you stop by Anna's Joint on the 400 block. Not only do they have Anna's Joint, this restaurant and bar, but they also have the amazing deli next door, and then next door to that they have a very exotic flower shop. You may want to stop by and say hi.
Yes, and we are back, you guys. And just so you know, we normally do cover 6 stories every day. However, I have a hard stop in 11 minutes today. I have an important thing that I have to do, and I cannot be late. And so I had 2 stories set up for the remainder of the show, and I asked the doctors which one they wanted to cover. And so the story that we will not be covering, that you will only be able to read on our website, is going to be, there was a study that says that CBD protects insulin producing cells in obesity and boosts key metabolic pathways, you guys. And so that we will not be discussing today. But what we are going to discuss today as our final story of today is going to be a clinical trial finds CBD suppositories linked to symptom relief in men with chronic pelvic pain syndrome, you guys. They've been thrusting too hard, apparently, all that pelvic pain. A clinical trial published in Biomedical Papers for the Medical Faculty of the University of Palacký Olomouc in the Czech Republic found that rectal suppositories containing cannabidiol, CBD, and hyaluronic acid, better known as HA, were associated with symptom improvements in men diagnosed with chronic non-bacterial prostasis, also known as chronic pelvic pain syndrome, better known as CP/CPPS. The pilot study involved 16 men between the ages of 24 and 49 who had moderate to severe symptoms defined as a National Institute of Health Chronic Prostasis Symptom Index, better known as NIH-CPSI, score above 10 and a pain subscore of at least 4. Participants self-administered Canef, CANNEFF, and that's a registered trademark, suppositories containing 100 milligrams of CBD and 6.6 milligrams of HA nightly for 30 days. Researchers reported that the median NIH-CPSI total score fell from 24.5 at baseline to 20.0 after 30 days, a statistically significant reduction in P equals 0.003. The median reduction in score was 7 points, and 81.3% of participants experienced overall symptom improvement. Urinary symptoms also improved, and the median International Prostate Symptom Score, IPSS, dropped from 14 to 12, better known as P equals 0.033, with the most notable changes observed in voiding-related symptoms and erectile function measured using the International Index of Erectile Function, IIEF-5, increased slightly. though the change was not statistically significant. No adverse events were reported during the 30-day treatment period, and while the trial was small and lacked a placebo control group, the authors concluded that rectal administration of a CBD/HA combination demonstrated potential for symptom relief in men with CP/CPPS, warranting further study in larger controlled trials. Wow, you guys. Pelvic thrust disorder, and I can't wait to hear what you doctors have to say about this. You gonna put in a thrust in this?
Well, so chronic pelvic pain syndrome is experienced by both men and women. Usually with the women, and usually it's more with women, 15% of women, 10% of men. But usually with the women, it's something to do with their uterus, endometriosis, or something affecting the tubes. With men, it's usually due to the prostate. And if you reach through the rectum right at the edge, there's a prostate there. So the medicine can be delivered directly if you do a rectal suppository to your prostate, which is probably why they decided to do this study.
Interesting. And you know what I have to say about this? In thrusts we trust. What do you think about this, Dr. Mark?
Yeah, I didn't know there was such a syndrome.
Man, bro, it's apparently it's running rapid. You know what I'm saying? I bet you this is probably caused from smoking Canadian weed too.
Precision, no. 10% of men, the prostate, as you get older, it does things. It swells.
Little swell, well, that's why the CBD is good for it, right? It reduces that inflammation, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
So a case for CBD suppositories, they're out there, the suppositories are, and there's vaginal suppositories too. There's that Hello Again.
Yeah. Did you say get a case of suppositories? Is that what you said, Dr. T?
I said vaginal suppositories.
Oh, I thought you said get a case of suppositories. Got it.
Just like a case of beer or something.
You know what I'm saying?
Have a good evening.
Yeah, exactly. I see Dr. Mark he's excited about this story. He's checking this out. He's like, oh, what is going on over here? I've never heard of this.
So what we know is that transbuccal delivery, which is through suppositories, is a great way to get cannabinoids into the bloodstream. And not just for GI related disorders. I mean, I think this is not a GI related disorder, this pelvic thrust thing, but maybe the fact that that's in the same location in the body, you get that delivered in a way that is efficacious, I think is interesting to think about.
Interesting.
But yeah, very interesting.
You know who doesn't have a problem with pelvic thrusts, you guys? Shakira, because her hips don't lie.
How do we get pelvic thrust from chronic pelvic pain syndrome?
I don't know. That was going to be my next question, Dr. T. You read my mind.
Got us there.
I didn't name it. I didn't name this syndrome. You know what I'm saying? That's what it's called, and I didn't name that. Just saying. I would have called it probably something else. You know what I mean?
Wait, it's called pelvic thrust syndrome.
That's what it's called.
Yes.
No, but it's called pelvic thrust syndrome. I didn't make this up. You know what I mean?
Oh, I thought you did.
No. I did not make this up. That's cute though. I mean, in all fairness, I probably should have, but I did not. I did not make this up. I'm not going to take credit for that. But I do agree with you. It probably should be called something else. You know what I mean?
Well, I know it as CPPS. I didn't realize that there was a pelvic thrust thing going on out there too.
Yeah, it's apparently someone is not good with initials because CPPS is not abbreviated for pelvic thrust disorder. You know what I'm saying?
Not at all.
Yeah, that'd be PTD. You know what I mean? But It's fascinating stuff, you guys. Always enjoy a Friday with the doctors, man. This is great. Lots of great information. And on that, want to thank you all for joining us and getting high at 9 with us every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific and high noon on the East Coast. And big thank you to our audience and supporters for tuning in daily and listening to the insanity that is the developing cannabis industry. Huge thank you to Catalyst Cannabis for helping us keep the lights on over here. And thank you to our correspondents for being absolutely amazing. And thank you to Cannabis Sativa L for giving us a reason to do this every day. Thank you to Cloud Media partners Elias and Gabriel. They're somewhere in the metaverse. And thank you all for tuning in and getting high at 9 with us. We are America's #1 daily cannabis news show. And this wraps up month 2 of 2026, you guys. When we see you on next week, it'll be March already. What do you think about that?